The promise was as simple as a handshake and a suitcase. Secure this deal for my husband, and I would be repaid in a way no contract could record. When his client stepped into our living room with a smile that smelled of linen and money, I told myself I was making a sacrifice. I did not foresee how quickly sacrifice would begin to feel like appetite. I tell this story not to justify my choices, but because confession feels like the only honest currency left to me. My name is Elena Carter. I am 34, married to Samuel Carter, an earnest architect with a nervous laugh and a tendency to sketch blueprints on cocktail napkins. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn with a small balcony that holds a dying lemon tree and enough sunlight for 2 people who are trying to remember how to be generous to each other. Samuel has always been good at beginnings. He can charm a client with a sketch and a quiet certainty that he will make their ideas into spaces they want to live inside. He is terrible, however, at winning the first big contract that changes a career's trajectory. Years of small commissions had left him simmering with potential, but short on the kind of spotlight that makes colleagues stop and take notes. I watched him work at nights, the lamplight sketching shadows across his jaw, and I wanted to hand him the world on a silver tray, no questions asked. The opportunity arrived in the form of a meeting invitation and the name Theodore Blake. Theodore was a developer with a reputation that preceded him. Tasteful hotels in the Hamptons, a restoration on the Upper West Side, a reputation for choosing teams who could deliver elegance without ostentation. The kind of man who made lunches feel like interviews, and who could decide the color palette for a building with a single glance. When Theodore expressed interest in Samuel's portfolio, the air in our apartment changed. Samuel called me that night with trembling excitement. I could hear him smiling across the line. I wanted to be practical. I wanted to play my part as the supportive spouse who makes coffee and irons shirts. But practicality wears thin when the person you love is on the cusp of the thing they have worked toward for a decade. Samuel had been ready for so long that his readiness took on the weight of an injustice. The client meeting mattered because it could open rooms in the world for designs that were not just beautiful, but humane. The work mattered to him in the way habit and devotion become a kind of faith. Theodore asked to meet in person to discuss the scope, his assistant added in an email, and then sent a time. He would be in town for 3 days, the message said. He preferred to meet in the evenings. When Samuel showed me the email, he said softly, "It could be nothing. It could be everything." The way his face glowed with equal parts hope and fear made me feel both protective and restless. I told myself I would hold the home steady. I would be the place where calm returned. When Theodore arrived at our apartment that evening, I was on the balcony, rinsing a glass. The doorbell clicked and I called out a casual invitation before I recognized him standing in the doorway. Tall, perfectly tailored in a navy suit, hair combed back as if he had rehearsed his arrival. He had a hand extended and a smile that was measured and warm. He smelled faintly of cedar and something citrus, and despite my resolve, I noticed the small perfect details of him, the way someone notices the way a painting catches light. He had noticed Samuel's work before he ever met him in person. That much was clear the moment he took the portfolio. He flipped through pages with a kind of devoted attention that made Samuel beam. They spoke about lines and materials and about breathing spaces into old facades. When Theodore paused over a rendering and said, "This has restraint," there was a shift in the room like daylight finding a window. He stayed longer than a polite meeting should. He accepted a simple dinner and asked about the city's fabric as if he wanted to see it through Samuel's eyes. He complimented the plants on the balcony. He commented on the lemon tree with the kind of curiosity that is both observational and intimate. When he laughed, I felt an odd, heavy flutter. I told myself the flutter was for Samuel, for his excitement and the possibility that the meeting represented. I told myself I was proud and nothing else. The request came 2 nights later in a way that was nearly absurd for its casualness. Theodore called after an industry event and asked if he could see more of Samuel's models, perhaps at our place where the work was less curated and more honest. Samuel, flushed from the evening and glowing with nerves, suggested the next day. I was at the sink, my palms warm on ceramic. I said yes before weighing the incalculable consequences. What followed felt orchestrated in slow motion. Theodore arrived with a leather briefcase that contained larger plans and photographs, and he stayed long enough for the apartment's light to change from gold to the soft blue of evening. He asked Samuel about sketches, about suppliers, about whether a certain material would hold up to salt and wind. I sat nearby, pretending to mind the wine that I poured into 3 glasses. He spoke to both of us at once, and when he spoke to me, he had a kind of personal tone that felt out of place for an industry conversation. "You have a good eye," he said to me casually, as if commenting on a pattern in the rug, and the sentence landed with a weight that suggested more than observation. He toggled casualness with an intensity that became disarming. There was a look he would give when Samuel made a point, an appreciative, private appraisal that felt like praise, and an inventory both. I noticed the small ways he angled himself in the room, the ways his presence rearranged air. What began as admiration sharpened into suggestion. Theodore hinted at possibilities beyond a single contract. Collaborations, introductions, the sort of quiet patronage that could alter careers without the messy glare of contest. He spoke of a dinner with partners who liked to make decisions in small, pleasant rooms, of weekend retreats where ideas became plans. He loved Samuel's restraint and said he valued discretion in all his dealings. The conversation folded into something warmer and more dangerous when Samuel left to take a call. Alone with Theodore, the apartment felt architected differently. He asked me about my job, about the small life I had built around my husband's work, and he listened to answers like they were artifacts. He admitted, with a frankness that felt like confession, that he admired the way spouses sometimes carry the emotional labor of talent. "Partners are often the quiet scaffolding of the people I hire," he said. "I like to know the scaffolding is strong." There are moments in a life when the moral calculus becomes a blur, when love, loyalty, and desire stare across a table and refuse to agree. I felt something in the silence between us, a possibility that he could be the hand to lift a life I loved into a brighter place. Theodore's attention felt like wind under Samuel's wings. His compliments were investments disguised as small talk. And wound into the praise, there was a brazen offer. He could make introductions that would move Samuel to the front of a shortlist if I were willing to offer access. The word came slow and strangely ordinary, as if we were discussing escrow, and not something that would bend the axis of our marriage. I remember the exact way my throat tightened. It was not the hot, dramatic suffocation of a fever. It was a measured constriction that mimicked prudence. "Access to what?" I asked. The question was thin, and the answer was thinner still. "Sometimes," he said, "a client wants a different kind of assurance. A private conversation that proves a partner is supportive, aligned, gracious." He meant in a way both poetic and crass, that the confidence he sought was social, intimate, personal. He did not demand, he suggested. He painted the image of a dinner where he could observe my social ease, of a weekend where I could charm a partner into liking Samuel before the numbers were even discussed. It was a manipulation that hid inside the language of mentorship. He was not crude. He was cultured, gentle, and practiced. When I told Samuel the next morning, he thought first of logistics and then of options. He wanted to be prepared for anything that would make his work speak for itself. He did not want me to do anything that would make me uncomfortable. We argued quietly, not with flair but with exhaustion, about the line between ambition and principle. He loved me enough to imagine alternatives, and loved his career enough to imagine them with a hunger that unsettled him. Our marriage had been built on compromise long before Theodore appeared, so when the conversation turned to sacrifice, it landed on familiar ground. We weighed consequences like budgets, what we might gain and what we might lose. Samuel's voice when he said, "If you think you can help, I trust you," was treacherous in its trust. My hands trembled with a strange adrenaline-sour cocktail of fear and resolve. The first test arrived as an invitation to a small salon hosted by Theodore at a private club. The event would be local influencers and a select partner who had the ear of decision-makers. Theodore suggested that I wear something simple, nothing ostentatious, and arrive at the earlier hour so we could speak privately. It was, on paper, an innocuous social setting. In practice, it felt like the moment I could tip the scale. At the club, the room smelled like citrus candles and old wood. Conversation moved in gliding arcs, and Theodore positioned me near a man who asked about my interests and seemed disarmed by my frankness. Theodore appeared periodically like a conductor, watching the way the room responded, approving subtle chest lifts when someone noticed Samuel's name. He paid close attention to the faces that perked at his mention of certain projects, and he leaned in when he thought someone important might be persuaded. After the salon, Theodore invited me for a short drive to a small nearby restaurant. The city had cooled, and the night air smelled of distant rain. I accepted because a refusal felt like burning a bridge I had not yet crossed. At the restaurant, he was looser than before, telling stories of journeys and tastes he loved. His hand found mine at one point across the table with the most natural gesture, as if he were sharing a secret ingredient in a recipe. The touch was not violent. It was patient and measured, and I felt its effect like the first note of a chord. "I hope this is not awkward for you," he said, when our conversation navigated the private territories of marriage and career. "I value directness. I want to make things easy for you and Samuel. I believe in reciprocity." The word hung between us with a clarity that felt like an offered currency. I told him what I thought he wanted to hear. I said I would be happy to be helpful in any way that felt comfortable. He smiled with gratitude. We arranged a few more meetings, a coffee at a gallery opening, a casual luncheon at a hotel. Each interaction tightened the knot of familiarity. Theodore's manner was an exercise in economy. He gave me small, precise attentions that signified value without overwhelming. The line I told myself would remain uncrossed began to blur, not at first through a singular act, but through accumulation. A touch that lingered to study the ring on my finger. An intimate joke that felt like property. A compliment that sounded like entitlement. I began to anticipate his texts, to rehearse conversations in stairwells and under fluorescent wash of office lights. The attention was flattering and addictive in equal measure. It felt like fuel poured into a small, hungry engine. When he kissed me, it was not the reckless, scandalous assault that headline writers imagine. It happened in the warm privacy of a private suite, after an evening of conversation that had filigreed us with connection. The kiss came after a long conversation about art and memory, and after a wine that loosened inhibition. He did not ambush me. He reached gently, as if asking permission without speaking. Our lips met with a pressure that was curious and thorough. The kiss moved from question to statement with an economy that stunned me. It was full-bodied and intimate in a way that translated into a pressure in my chest and a sudden sharpness in my breath. I remember the way my body remembered his mouth, not as a map of desire, but as a rehearsal of intimacy. My palms knew his shoulders. My knees remembered the way a wordless consent had lengthened. Desire has an anatomy that is equal parts physiology and narrative. What horrified me was not that I felt desire, but how easily desire began to create the rationalizations I needed to make it permissible. We told ourselves stories afterward. Theodore said he was honoring us both by being discreet. He framed his advances as appreciative gestures toward a woman who carried her husband's work with grace. I told myself that this was a means to a career, that I could control the terms, that the contract it bought Samuel was worth the quiet duplicity. Samuel, when he learned of my proximity, mistook omission for strategy. He believed I had withheld nothing of significance because he trusted my sense of judgment. He had no idea the soft erosion taking place in the private margins of our life. The affair, our secret, shifted my moral center. I began to think and act in ways that were compartmentalized. I crafted small lies about where I had been and what had been said. I routed my weeks around opportunities to be useful. I learned to parry the quick questions about dinner plans with plausible errands. These were not monstrous deceptions at first. They were tiny surrenders, the kind that compound and become devouring. I watched Samuel change in small increments. He was buoyed by a new confidence after Theodore's first nod to his work. He took calls with a steadiness that made me proud. But there were also nights when he stared at me from across the table, with the raw need of someone who wants proof that the foundation he has leaned upon is not crumbling. My deceit ate at me. There were evenings when I couldn't meet his eyes because the truth felt too heavy to hold and too dangerous to release. The climax of everything arrived when a contract was signed. Samuel was offered a design leadership role on a new development that would anchor his portfolio. The news should have been a moment of unadulterated joy. Instead, it came with a complement of complications. Theodore, the client, requested a private celebratory dinner with Samuel and me. He wanted to toast to the future. The invitation was framed as a courtesy. Underneath it was a negotiation I had perpetrated in my own bones. At dinner, the three of us shared polite conversation and then softened into confidences. Toasts were made. Glasses clinked. I watched Theodore's gaze find me across the candlelight with an ownership that was less gentle pretense and more a quiet claim. He thanked me directly for my kindness and in the same breath, acknowledged that he was happy to have been part of Samuel's turning point. It was not a confession as much as an ordinance. The aftermath was a mix of triumph and ruin. Samuel's career took a visible trajectory upward. Doors opened the way they do for those who suddenly have the right names in their address books. Colleagues praised his discipline. Offers came. We stayed in a small hotel that weekend to celebrate, and I watched him unpack the world of possibility like a child with a new map. He was radiant, and I was hollow with a gratitude that felt adulterated. The truth eventually made itself known in the unglamorous terrain of a misdirected email. A message intended to coordinate a vendor had my name in the CC field, alongside a note that suggested the extra services I had provided as an implicit condition. There was no salacious detail in the email, only the blunt business shorthand that suggested reciprocity had been understood. Samuel opened the email because he was checking details and he noticed. He came into the room with the slowness people have when they are waiting for something to prove itself. He did not shout. He sat down, and there was a long silence where the apartment collected its breath. I told him everything. Not out of bravery, but out of a sudden, sharp need to stop the quiet rot of secrets. I explained what had happened, how it had started as a plan to help him, how the lines had dissolved, how I had told myself that ends justify means. I expected anger, perhaps a departure, or a furious devastation. What I got instead was an exhausted sadness in Samuel's face that I had never seen before. He told me he understood the ambition and the ache, and he also told me he felt betrayed, not only by the act, but by the erosion of our mutual trust. We did not sever ourselves from each other in one clean motion. We sat with the outcome like two people sorting through debris. There were apologies, and there was an attempt at repair. Samuel wanted to know when the decision had become personal. I could not mark the moment because the line had blurred long before my awareness unspooled. We sought counseling. We argued. We learned the currency of small reparative acts, showing up, scheduling time without phones, acknowledging the mess without melodrama. Time did what it does to all narratives. It altered our perception of the events. Samuel's career retained its trajectory. The contract that arrived opened doors for him I could not shoulder. He learned to carry the attention without arrogance and with a cautious humility. Our marriage, damaged, did not dissolve, but it did shift. The trust we had was now tempered by history. I learned the weight of honesty and the simple, difficult power of refusing to barter myself for someone else's success again. I do not tell this story to indict Theodore alone. He was a man of wealth and appetite, sure, but he offered an opening that I chose to walk through. I do not tell it to paint Samuel as a victim. He was an architect of his own choices. I tell it as a map of how desire, naked or disguised as pragmatism, can accentuate the fractures already present in a life. I tell it as a confession of how easy it is to forget the small things that keep a marriage whole. Shared jokes, the mundane rituals of making coffee together, the ordinary sacrament of being present. If there is a lesson in my confession, it is this: ambition is not a sin, nor is desire inherently wrong. But when they are leveraged against the people we love, we pay a toll that no contract will cover. The moral calculus is messy and infuriating because it often comes down to private reckonings, to the small choices that create or erode trust. Sometimes in the quiet of the apartment, I imagine the instant before a line is crossed. I picture a turning point not as a dramatic event, but as a series of small compromises. I think of how easy it is to make the case for a single sacrifice when the cause appears just. I live with the memory of my choices and with the hard, steady work of rebuilding a life where the currency is more than the sum of favors and favors returned. I still believe in Samuel's work. I still admire the way he sketches, the way he can imagine a room before it exists. I still keep the lemon tree watered. We have grown into a new kind of careful. There is a resilience in our tenderness now that did not exist before. It is not the clean trust we once had, but a more cautious, deliberate connection. I volunteer this story as proof that love can sometimes survive foolishness, but it survives better when it is guarded by truth. If you are listening and feel tempted to make bargains you are not entirely comfortable with, ask yourself what the cost will be to the people who share your mornings. Ask whether the victory you seek is worth the architecture of a life built on compromised foundations. There is power in choosing differently, and there is dignity in refusing to auction your intimacy for someone else's gain.